I knew that the bad things and disappointments had to happen in order for the better and more exciting things to happen. America wanted romance, so Melissa Gilbert begged Michael Landon to change the plots for Little House on the Prairie. She had to give birth at age 15, and she had never been kissed at age 23. Dean Butler knew it was wrong, but they filmed scene after scene while 100 crew members watched her mother cry in the shadows. Fans wrote angry letters. Now, both stars are finally admitting what everyone thought, but no one would say the truth about their relationship on screen is worse than anyone thought. Melissa Gilbert had a broken heart before she even had a name. She was born in Los Angeles on May 8, 1964. Her biological parents, Kathy Wood and David Darlington, were newly engaged and already had 3 kids from previous marriages. The day after she was born, they gave her up for adoption, saying they couldn't afford to raise a 7th child. Melissa never spent a full night with them. She was adopted right away by actor and comedian Paul Gilbert and his wife, dancer and actress Barbara Crane. That instant separation stayed with her forever. In her book Prairie Tale, she wrote, "A large part of my life has been an illusion. Paul Gilbert was more than just her father. He was her whole world." On February 13, 1976, Melissa, who was only 11, was told that her dad had died of a stroke. It made sense since he had had one before, but the truth was much worse. Paul Gilbert killed himself decades ago, but no one told Melissa. He was a fighter pilot in World War II and lived with constant, unbearable pain from injuries he sustained. The Veterans Administration cared for him, but even they couldn't help him cope. By the time Melissa found out the truth, she was 44 years old. It broke her. She told Oprah she was barely functioning for weeks, and she ended up hiring a private investigator to find out what really happened. She needed answers, and she needed to know why the person who had kept her from being unwanted had disappeared, and no one had told her the truth. Even though she was adopted, Melissa had show business in her blood. Her adoptive mother Barbara Crane was the daughter of Harry Crane, who created The Honeymooners and helped turn Dean Martin's show into celebrity roasts. Harry was a giant in the early days of television. He wrote for the Oscars, the Emmys, and even the Golden Globes. His legacy shaped the world Melissa would grow up in. Barbara also had her own career in entertainment, so Melissa grew up in a family where TV sets, scripts, and red carpets were normal parts of life. In 1967, showbiz energy flowed through the whole family. A few years later, in 1975, Paul and Barbara adopted another child named Jonathan Gilbert. Barbara also had a daughter named Sarah with her new husband, attorney Harold Abeles. Melissa, Jonathan, and Sarah all became TV stars. Melanie didn't become famous by accident. She worked for it. Before she was 5, she was already in ads. In 1977, she was in an Alpo dog food ad with Lauren Green. Gilbert and Green got along great, and in the ad, Gilbert was overjoyed that her dog Fluffy had won a blue ribbon when she was only 9 years old. Melissa Gilbert stepped into a casting room filled with more than 500 hopeful girls and left with a role that would define her for life. It was early 1973 and NBC was searching nationwide for the perfect child to play Laura Les in a new pilot. When Melissa walked in and began her screen test with Michael Landon, something happened. He didn't just see a young actress, he saw his on-screen daughter. He later said there was a magic in her performance. She wasn't acting, she was Laura, and right there at the Burbank Studios her life changed forever. The funny part, Melissa had no idea who Landon was. She'd never watched Bonanza, a show that had made him a star for 14 straight years. So when she auditioned, she didn't act nervous or try to impress him with compliments. She just played the scene. That honesty, that lack of polish was exactly what Landon had been hoping to find. She didn't see him as a celebrity, she saw him as P, and that bond, that effortless connection would become the heart of Little House on the Prairie. For the next 9 years, even the way Melissa found out she got the role felt like something out of a TV drama. Leslie Landon, a friend, walked up to her with a big smile one day. Leslie, his real daughter, told him, "My dad picked you." No phone call, no studio announcement, just 2 girls in a school hallway. Years later, those 2 girls would be back on set, with Leslie playing schoolteacher Ada Plum in the last seasons of the show. Melissa filmed the pilot in the beautiful hills of California in the summer of 1973. It aired in March 1974 and had over 17 million viewers, which was a huge hit. But even after that success, She had to wait almost a year to find out if the show would become a full series. For a kid, that kind of wait seems like forever. In June 1974, filming began again, and Little House on the Prairie was officially born. It would run until 1983, with 9 full seasons of family problems and life on the frontier. She had to play out a scene where Laura says goodbye to her dog at her last audition. It was hard, with real tears and pain. Landon was paying close attention, and by the end he had tears in his eyes. That's something that not many adult actors, let alone child actors, could do. It wasn't training or skill. It was pure emotional honesty. That day, he realized she wasn't just playing Laura Les. She was her from 10 to 19 years old. At its peak, the show had more than 20 million viewers per episode, and Melissa wasn't just playing a character. She was growing up in front of the whole country. She was in America's living room, and millions of people watched her lose her baby teeth, get taller, and go through puberty all on camera. No child in history had ever been watched this closely for that long. It was more than just a show. It was a national event that happened one episode at a time, while most kids were riding their bikes or doing their homework. Melissa had to learn lines and get ready for camera at dawn. But school didn't stop. Instead of going to a regular classroom, she learned right on set, where tutors would jump in between takes and give short, focused lessons to meet state education rules. Although it wasn't easy, Melissa and the other child actors formed a close-knit group of kids who lived in 2 worlds at once, student and star. Despite her busy schedule, Melissa found time to take on roles that showed she wasn't just a one-show wonder. In 1979, she played Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker, which was intense and emotional and earned her an Emmy nomination. The next year, she played Frank in another dramatic role, which earned her another nomination. These weren't just cute kid roles. They were some of the hardest young characters on TV, and she nailed them all while still filming Little House. But the craziest part of Melissa's story isn't the fame or the awards. Laura's struggles, values, and strength became a part of Melissa. She said that Little House wasn't just a job. It was her childhood, her family, and her whole world by the time the show ended. There wasn't a clear line between who she was and who she played. The character helped raise her. When Dean Butler was cast as Almanzo Wilder in Season 6 of Little House on the Prairie, he was 23 years old. Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura Ingalls, was only 15. That 8-year difference might not seem like much now, but in 1979 it felt like a canyon. Dean even called it the Grand Canyon of age gaps for a show that aired during Family Hour and prided itself on telling happy, wholesome stories. Melissa was still in high school and Dean was fresh out of college, but they were expected to play sweethearts in romantic scenes. Emotional closeness, a first kiss all on screen, all for millions to watch. That decision made by the producers created tension and discomfort that never really went away. Melissa didn't hide how she felt when she first heard Dean was cast. Her emotions exploded. She called it a perfect storm of disappointment, fear, anger, and nausea. She had imagined acting opposite someone close to her age, someone who understood what it meant to be a teenager. Instead, they brought in a man with stubble, a man she'd be expected to kiss, but that wasn't just acting, it became real. In the episode titled Sweet 16, Laura gets her first kiss. And so did Melissa. It wasn't just her first kiss on camera, it was her first kiss ever. No dates, no experience, nothing to prepare her for it. Just a film crew, bright lights, and nearly 100 people staring as the cameras rolled. Dean Butler knew it was awkward. He later admitted he was nervous. Really nervous. She was just a little girl. He said it was hard. He knew that in today's Hollywood, this kind of casting would never fly. It would be rejected instantly, but back then it happened, and it became one of the most talked about moments in the show's history. What made it even harder was what happened off-screen. Melissa's mother, Barbara Ablees, stood behind the cameras watching as her daughter leaned in for that kiss. Barbara broke down crying. This wasn't a proud moment, it was a painful one. Her little girl was growing up not in private, but in front of the world, on a set with a grown man for ratings. Dean clearly remembered it. He later wrote in his autobiography, Prairie Man, that Barbara didn't like the idea of him being cast, and that when the kiss happened, her dislike turned into heartbreak because she couldn't stand to see me kiss her daughter. Melissa, on the other hand, did everything she could to avoid it. She begged Michael Landon, the show's creator, to change scenes so it could just be a hug. She begged to stay in her comfort zone. But the scripts kept coming in, kiss after kiss, scene after scene, and she had to play the part even when she was sick, terrified, or had never felt love in real life. Viewers noticed that some loved the romance and others were horrified. One mother wrote to a newspaper demanding that the casting director be burned at the stake for pairing a teenage girl with an adult man. And Dean Butler got letters from fans saying that watching those scenes made them feel uncomfortable, which they were. It was said in a 1979 article that Dean Butler might have the hardest role of the season, not because of the lines but because of the reality. The article said, "He has to convince viewers that it's okay for a grown man to fall in love with a teenage girl." The episode, Sweet 16, was a huge hit, topping the Nielsen ratings and airing twice during prime time that summer. It became famous, and TV Land even gave them an award for the most memorable kiss in TV history. But what was the cost for a 15-year-old girl who was forced to deal with adult feelings? A mother who was left to cry in the dark, an actor who was very uncomfortable, and a business that at the time put numbers above all else afterwards. The dean told her, "You just couldn't do it today." He is right that times and standards have changed, and Hollywood's treatment of young actors has also changed for the better. But for Melissa Gilbert, that change came too late. Her childhood was shaped by a story she didn't write. Melissa Gilbert's life looked perfect on TV, but behind the scenes, things were going badly. Millions of people watched her as Laura Less on Little House on the Prairie. Melissa slowly became addicted to alcohol and drugs. It started when she was a teenager and got worse quickly. By the time she was an adult, she was drinking 2 full bottles of wine every night. This wasn't just for fun. She was drinking to survive. One night, she blacked out and passed out in her dog's bed while she had guests over for dinner. That's when she realized she couldn't keep living this way. But alcohol wasn't her only escape. She was also using cocaine. Being a child star made her lonely, and the constant pressure of fame made her feel good. The drugs numbed the pain for a while, but they hurt her relationships and her parenting. Eventually, her son begged her to stop drinking, and it was the wake-up call she couldn't ignore. She joined Alcoholics Anonymous the next day, and the 12-step program became her lifeline. As she listened to other people share their darkest stories in those meetings, she finally felt less alone. In her 2009 memoir, Prairie Tale, she wrote about her addictions, failed relationships, and the emotional damage caused by a childhood spent in the public eye. But the trauma didn't end there. Melissa tried out for a part in Oliver Stone's movie The Doors in the early 1990s. Gilbert Stone says that what happened next haunted her for years because she wanted revenge for saying bad things about him in public. During the audition, he set her up by giving her a scene he said he had just written for her. It wasn't a real scene. It was a trap. The lines were racy, and she had to get on her hands and knees and say, "Do me, baby." She was ashamed, and tears filled her eyes. It was cold when Stone looked at her and said, "Good, that will make things better."